Hi friends, welcome to Timing Python series. In this video, we're going to talk about how to do logging in Python. So before starting, let's see what we're going to cover in this video. We're going to cover minimal logging, like logging in just 1-2 lines, and you can see logs are generated. And then we're going to see how to use the logger object and logging handler, and how to change the date format of the logs, and how to do logging into files just like this, and how to show error data in logs, and how to rotate logs so that the log file doesn't become huge, and how to rotate logs based upon the log file size and log file timestamps, and how to rotate logs and zip the old log files so that you can save a lot of disk space, something like this. So you can see we are covering a lot of topics in logging. So I have created chapters for this video so that you can easily switch through the topics. So please see the chapters for this video in the timeline. All right, let's get started. Why do logging? Logging is basically just something like printing into the console. And why is it important? Logging can help to achieve observability of the performance and the security of a Python application. Errors can be easily debugged by looking at the logs. Changes in the application state can be easily traced by looking at the logs if they are logged properly. And if there are some performance issues or security issues, they can also be addressed easily by analyzing the logs which are generated by the application. So logging is really important if you want to maintain an application. And fortunately, logging is really easy in Python. There is a module called logging in Python which comes inbuilt with the Python installation. So you don't need to install logging module separately. Generally, it comes along with the Python installation. All right, there is something called a logging level. So logging level is basically attaching a tag to each log. There are 6 logging levels in the Python logging module. So these are the logging levels: critical, error, warning, info, debug, and not set. The log with a level called critical is considered to be more important, and the log with the level not set is considered to be least important. So this is the decreasing level of the log's importance. So this tag can be useful to easily filter out important and unimportant logs. So let's imagine we are creating some millions of logs. The logs with the logging level critical might be only in tens, and the logs with the logging level warning might be only in hundreds. So you can easily filter out the logs based upon the level of criticality. That's why logging levels are important, to easily sort out important logs. And if you want to just debug what's the application state, you can just go through the debug logs or info logs. So that's why logging levels are important, and these 6 logging levels are present in the Python's logging module. All right, let's get started with coding. Now I'll just show you how to do minimal logging. That means logging with very less lines of code. To create logs, you just need to import the logging module, right? So in a Python file, I'm just going to write import logging. So I've got the logging module imported from Python, and then I'm going to just create a log, logging.info, and let me name it hello world. All right, let's try to run this now. You see, I didn't get any log. Maybe this logging level is not qualified for printing. Let's try to change the log level from info to critical. And now let's try to run this now. And now you can see the log critical, the log level, the name of the user, and the log message itself. So this is the log which I just created in a single line of code. But I just want to show info logs also. I just don't want to show only critical logs in the console. So let me try to write logging.info, and let me try to change the minimum logging level. So how can I do that? It's really simple. Just write logging.basicConfig, and using the basic config you can control which is the minimum level of logging. So let me write level equal to logging.info. All right, now I've said that the minimum logging level is info. So now my log should come to the console. So let me try to save this and run it. And here you can see the info log is also showing now. So using basic config, I'm controlling the minimum logging level of the root logger which is being used now. So if I write logging.debug, the log should not come because the minimum logging level which I set is info, right? Debug is the log which is below info. So if I just run this, you can see there is no log created because debug is a logging level which is less critical than info. The next thing we're going to talk about is how to change the format of logging. So here the default format was the level of logging, the username which is logging, and the message of the log itself. So if I want to print the timestamp also, how can I do that? So you can do that very easily using the format input of this basic config function, format equal to, and it's a format string. And here in the format string, there are some keywords which you can use to specify the format. For example, to show the timestamp, you can write something like this. To show the logging level, you can write something like this, level name. And to show the log message, you can write message. So now the log will be something like this, the timestamp, 2:, the level name, 2:, and the message. So this is going to be the log format now because I've set it in the basic config. So let me try to save this and run this. And now you can see I've got the timestamp, the logging level, and the log message. So I have changed the default logging format using basic config. So just using 2 lines of code, now you can create as many logs as you want. So let me try to copy paste this and write something like critical, and the log would be, this is a critical log. And let's try to run this now. So now you can create as many logs as you want in this Python code. So this is how you can use just 2 lines of code to create logs in your Python codes, and you can even control the logging level and the logging format. If you print logs into the console, the logs may be lost when you just close the console, right? So if you want to persist your logs to your text file, it's really easy using the basic logging config. You just write file name input here, file name equal to, let me try to create a file called test.log, and now the logs will be pushed into this file called test.log. So let me try to save this and run this. You can see logs are not printed in the console, and here I got a text.log file, and in this logs are being generated as per our Python code. Now let's try to run this again, and let's try to open this test.log again, and you got the new logs appended here. So now I got a record of my logs which are generated by my Python program. So just by writing file name equal to path of the file, you are able to create logs. And here you can see the path is a relative path. I just given the file name. That means the log file will be in the same folder as the Python code. But if you want to give absolute path, something like C users, whatever, the folder path test.log, it will go there. So you can give the absolute path also. So that's how you can do very minimal logging using the basic config. And the next important topic is logging with logger object and log handler. Using this approach will give you more options, and we're going to see this in this example now. So first let's try to create a logger object. So I'm going to write logger equal to logging dot get logger. So get logger function, you can create a logger object, and you can give whatever the name of the logger. You got name loggers now. You can write my logger. So now you have a logger with a name, and then you can set the minimum logging level. I can just write logger dot set level, and I'm going to set the logging level as logging.info. And now let's see the first advantage of using a logger object. You can create multiple logger objects, and you can use any of those loggers to create your logs. But in the previous approach of minimal logging, you just have one root logger, and all the configuration will be in the same root logger. That means now I can create another logger, something like logger2, and I can set the logging level of logger2 something like critical, and this can be having some other name like my logger2. So this way, using this approach, you can create multiple logger objects. Alright, now let's go to the log handlers. So just creating a logger object wouldn't suffice to generate logs. We have to create a log handler which will just process the logs and send to the logging destination. So let's try to create a handler that can send logs to the console. So I'm going to create a handler called console logger. So I'm going to create a handler called console handler, and to create a console based logging handler, just try to create a handler called logging.stream handler. So stream handler is basically the logging handler which actually sends logs to the console. And now if you want to change the format of these logs, you can have a log formatter. Actually, instead of writing the format string directly, you can create a formatter. You can have a log formatter object actually. So let's try to do that. Console formatter equal to logging.formatter, and here you can give the format string. So this is my format string, timestamp, a hyphen, level name, a hyphen, and the message itself. So now I've created a log formatter object, and I have to assign it to the handler, right? So I'm going to write console handler dot set formatter, this console formatter. And now you can see the advantage of using the formatter object. You can use this formatter object in multiple log handlers, and now you got the log handler which can send logs to destinations, but this handler is still not mapped with the logger object, right? So just write logger dot add handler and add this console handler, and that's it. Now you have your logging setup using the logger object and log handler. Now let's try to create some logs. Logger dot info, and here it's going to be something like an info log, and let's try to create a logger something like logger dot warning, and let's say this is a warning log, and let's try to run this now. And here you got the console based logging using the logger and log handler. Alright, one more important thing is how can you show the error information in your logs? Something like stack trace or whatever. So how can I do that? I can write try and just try to simulate an error. I'll just write 1 by 0, which is a divided by 0 error, and I'm going to catch that error except exception as E. Now error is going to be in E, and I'm going to write logger dot error, and I'm going to say that some error occur. And now you can give extra data, something like execution info equal to error. So here you can use the error information, the error object itself, and that can be logged into the console. So now let's try to run this, and here you can see the error log is there, some error occurred, and the execution info which you have given the error object is also showing here, and this can be used for us to trace the error and get insight on what happened. Currently this error is not being handled, so if you want to handle the error, you can handle it, or you can just throw the error again. Alright, let's try to create logs again, and here you can see even the fraction of seconds are also being displayed in the timestamp. Suppose if I don't want to show the fraction of seconds, I just want to show date and time. I want to ignore this microseconds. How can I do that? For that, in the formatter, you can give the date format using this input called date fmt, and here you can specify the timestamp format. So if I want my timestamp to be year, month, date, hour, minutes, seconds, then only this format will be used while logging. So let me try to save this and run this, and here you can see microseconds are gone now. So if I just want to show time, just remove this year, month, date, and just run this, only time is shown. So this way, using the date fmt input, you can change the date format of the created logs. Alright, now let's see how to use multiple handlers for a single logger. So using log handler has another advantage. You can log into multiple destinations at once by creating multiple handlers and adding them to logger. It's really simple. So let's try to do that now. Let's try to copy this again, console handler, and just paste it here. And now let's try to get another handler called RotatingFileHandler. From logging.handlers, import RotatingFileHandler. So RotatingFileHandler is basically a log handler which can send logs into files. So I'm just going to copy this RotatingFileHandler. So I'm going to write FileHandler equal to RotatingFileHandler, and we can reuse formatters, right? So I don't need to create another formatter, and I'm going to say FileHandler dot set formatter, and I can use the same console formatter because I'm okay with this format. And now you got to give some inputs to this RotatingFileHandler. So let's try to go to the basic input, which is the file name. So I'm going to give the file name as test.log. So basically all logs will be now logged into this test.log file. So now I got another log handler, which is a file handler, and this can send logs into the text file called test.log. But I have to add this handler to the logger, right? So I'm just going to copy paste this line, logger.add-handler, and I'm going to write file handler. So now a logger has two log handlers, and the data will be sent into the console and the file simultaneously. So let's try to see this. I'm going to save this and run this, and I got my console logs, and let's try to see if I got my logs into the log file. The logs are appended here. You can see the timestamp format is also being imposed. So from this line, I got my logs generated in the file and in the console as well. So using this log handler and logger object approach, you can create logs simultaneously into multiple sources. Alright, now let's talk about the RotatingFileHandler log handler. If you have something like a Flask server or some script which will run on periodic basis for years, your log file can get bloated and can convert into GBs, and it can just crash your Python program. So to avoid that, you need to rotate logs, and rotating logs is very good practice. And fortunately, it's really easy in RotatingFileHandler. So suppose if I want to rotate logs for every 1 KB of log file size, I can just write max bytes equal to 1024. So that means 1024 bytes is basically 1 KB. So I'm telling for every 1024 bytes, if my log file crosses 1024 bytes, just send the old logs to a new file and again create the logs freshly in this log file. So that's basically log rotation. And there's one more option called backup count. So backup count, what it does essentially is basically it retains only latest log files. Suppose you have some 1 lakh log files. You don't want 1 lakh log files because it may bloat your storage, right? So if you want to retain only latest 100 log files, if you specify backup count equal to 100, automatically the logger will delete the old log files so that you can have your storage less loaded. So these are the two options for RotatingFileHandler, max bytes and backup count. Now my file handler will actually rotate logs when it reaches the threshold. But I don't want to create logs of 1 KB. So for testing purpose, let me try max bytes equal to 1. That means if logs exceed 1 byte, create new file. So for testing purpose, I'm doing this. I'm just running this again, and here you can see I've got my logs rotated now. Test log 1, test log 2, test log 3. Because if the log file size crosses 1 byte, which is obviously if you just write this simple line, it will be more than 1 byte. The logs are getting rotated to old files log.1, log.2, log.3, and logs are being freshly populated again in the test.log file. So log rotation is really important if you are logging continuously and your program is running periodically, days together and months together. So always rotate logs and set the right thresholds and the right retention count. Alright, now let's remove this console handler and let's try to rename this console formatter as file formatter. And now I've got my logs only logged into the file. Now let's go to another important log handler, which is timed rotating file handler. So time rotating file handler basically rotates logs based upon the timestamp of logs instead of the size of the log file. That means if you want to rotate your log files daily, it can be possible using time rotating file handler. So let's try to see that with an example now. So my file handler will be timed log file handler. So let me try to write time rotating log file handler, and the first input will be the file path, and another input is the backup count, which is basically how many log files you want to retain, and the old log files will be deleted. And then you got an option called when equal to, suppose I write when equal to d, that means daily. So for each 24 hours your log file will be rotated, and obviously the interval equal to 1, that means for each 24 hours, that means for each day your log will be rotated. If you write interval equal to 2, for each 2 days the log file will be rotated. So these are the options for the when parameter. So when equal to d means for each 24 hours, and there is an option called midnight. So if I write when equal to midnight, the logs will be rotated every 12 a.m. in the night. And then if you write when equal to s and write interval equal to something like 1, for each second your logs will be rotated. When you write when equal to m and write interval equal to 15, for each 15 minutes your logs will be rotated. If you write when equal to h, that means your logs will be rotated for each 15 hours now, and you can write d means days. And if you want to rotate your logs every Monday, suppose, you can write w0. If you want your logs rotate to every Tuesday, you can write w1. So this way you can have a very flexible time-based log rotation using this when parameter. So for our example, let me try to rotate logs for every second actually. So I'm going to write when equal to s and interval equal to 1. So let's try to save this now, and now let's try to run this. So here I got my log file with a timestamp. Let's try to log again, and now you got another log file with a timestamp, and the latest log will be coming here, and the previous logs will be sent into this time-based log file. So one very important advantage of using time-based log rotation is you can easily trace the logs based upon time. Now I have the timestamp, and if I come and see these logs after 10 days, I can know that okay, this log is of 17th November. Alright, so that's it about log rotation based upon file size and log timestamps. Alright, one more thing that people would like to do is basically changing this extension at the end of the file. So something like test.log.timestamp, instead of that you want text.timestamp.log. You want .log to be at the end of the file extension because it's easy for code editors like VS Code to interpret it as a log file. Now it's thinking it as plain text, but if you go to test.log, it's interpreting it as a log file. So how can I change the log file naming conventions while they're rotated? There is a very handy function called namer. So this is how you can customize the naming convention of log rotation. So I'm writing filehandler.namer equal to a lambda function. Basically it's a single line function in Python. So I'm writing that if you want to change the name, take the existing name and replace .log at the end, so that I will get .log at the end of the file. So this is a simple trick where I'm moving the .log extension to the end of the file name so that my IDEs can easily read the log files and interpret the log files. I'm just going to save this and run this, and now the new log file has .log extension at the end instead of having it at the first. So if I just open this, now my IDE is able to interpret because the extension is .log. So this is one more trick you can use to change the file naming conventions while log rotation. Alright, now let's go to the last topic, which is zipping the rotated log files. So now you can see a lot of log files are being generated. Let's try to understand why zipping of rotated logs may be useful. Suppose in a production scenario, I'm creating logs and I'm rotating logs every Monday. That means each rotated log file will have logs of a single week. This may be a huge file size, or this can be a file size of something like MBs. So if you zip each rotated log files, you can save a lot of disk space through compressing the log files. So let's see how can I compress my rotated log files. So first I'm going to define a rotator function, and I need some module imports for that. So let's go through what the rotator function does is, so basically we are zipping the rotated log file and removing the original log file itself. So this is the rotator function which you have defined, and then for a log handler you can define the rotator function also. So just by using this rotator function, you can just copy paste this. I will give the link of my blog post in the description. You can copy paste this rotator function and just assign this rotator function to the log handler. And then if you just run this, now you have a zip file based log rotator inbuilt in your logging system. Obviously you don't find any zipped files here because the files will be rotated every Monday. So let's try to just say that the log rotation will be each second and interval equal to 1. This is just for testing purposes. Now let's try to run this, and here you got my log file. You can see this is an unsupported log format, which is actually it's a zip file. So one thing I have to do here is I have to change my namer function to replace .log extension with the .zip extension when it is rotated, because I'm actually zipping the log files, right? It's not a log file now anymore, it's a zip file. So I have to change my namer function to replace the .log with .zip. So let me try to save this and run this again, and now I got a zip file. So let's try to open the zip file in the file explorer, and this is the zip file, and here in the zip file I got my test.log, and if I just open this log file, you can see my logs. So using this approach of zipping the logs will save you huge amount of memory if your log file is huge. That means if you have some 1 GB log file, the zip version will be only something like 200 MB. So this way you can substantially save disk space by zipping your old logs. So that's it guys, that is about logging in Python. You can see I have created a blog post on how to do logging in Python. I have also given the source code so that you can copy paste and practice it in your own computer. So be sure to check out the link of this blog post in the description of this video. Please share your valuable feedback or ask any questions in the comment section. Hope you like this video guys. Thank you for watching. Peace.